Hi everyone and welcome to Dennis Deep Cuts, the 58th installment of this fine YouTube series. Today we are going to talk about metal. Let's see what happens. So this one's been a long time coming. I usually talk about the fact that I was into metal before I got into punk rock and hardcore. And even though punk rock and hardcore really defined the person that I am today, metal was the music that set me on this path. Before metal, everything was just kind of normal. You know, you were a working class kid of the 80s, you were into hard rock and heavy metal, but then I was the person that I wanted more extreme things. I wanted more violent things. I wanted things to be faster, more aggressive. And metal made that possible, and metal opened up like a world of like outsider, you know, of the outsiders basically, and somewhere where I really felt that I could fit in and discover new music and discover a new identity of sorts. And that led me to where I am today basically. So I've always had like this affinity for metal music. It's always been close to my heart. And my first instinct was, let's do top 10 best metal records of all time. But then I got super, anxious about that. I'm like, yeah, that takes like 4 months of prepping to do that. So I might do that list, but not today. Today, I'm just going to show you 10 great, cool metal records that you might or might not have heard about. And yeah, that's kind of it for this program. Just some cool metal records. Let's dive on in. First record I want to talk about is Sacr from Milwaukee. Their debut album, Corrupt Minds, from 1988. They started already in 1983 as young teenagers. Put out one more record in 1990, and then they kind of faded into obscurity. It's one of those records, like if you like 80s thrash, this is really cool and really good. Well played. The songs are short and sharp. There's no lavish, like arrangements. It's just very almost punky in the way the songs are structured. There's touches of Slayer. There's some Anthrax in there. Maybe some Nuclear Assault and some Sacrilege. That type of like riff heavy thrash metal. It's a cool record. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of energy, and of course, it has a lot of energy because the one thing that I read about this band is that they're famous for the fact that their drummer almost made it into Slayer twice. So I guess that's their claim to fame. Their drummer was almost in Slayer twice. It's a really cool record. Check it out. Just just good thrash metal of the late 80s. So this next record, I don't know a lot about this band. There's very little information on the internet. They're a band called Metal Onslaught from Illinois. This one came out in 1987 on a German label. And I love this record. It's super wild, kind of aggressive. It's like kind of raw and chaotic, and it doesn't ever let up. Has a lot of energy to it. Thrashy, has definitely touches of like German speed metal, that kind of vibe. Like the Sodom and Destruction, that kind of vibe. But it also feels kind of punky in its approach, like a weird raw crossover thrash mix to it. Cease to Exist with Metal Onslaught. Yeah, it's a cool, chaotic record. So the next album I want to talk about is a bit different. I'm going to talk about a Swedish band. It started in Uppsala in 2002. Talking about In Solitude, here with the third record, Sister. Broke up in 2015, and they're one of my favorite metal bands of the last couple of years. The first two records was kind of like new wave of British heavy metal vibe to it, really good. Their second record, The World, The Flesh, The Devil, is a little bit of a masterpiece in that kind of like retro heavy metal kind of style. People say they really sound like Merciful Fate, which maybe kind of they do, but I didn't really pick up on that. I just think it's a great record. with this third record, they wanted to move away from just the more traditional heavy metal, and this is just like a super weird, moody, dark, borders at times of like goth rock, but it has like it feels firmly planted in like heavy metal. They're like a cool, like sinister vibe to it. I mean, these guys were like best friends with the black metal purveyors of Vetane, and I love this record. I think it's the songwriting is spectacular. The guitar work is great. The vocals are super cool, and it's just like one of those records that it's kind of a metal record, but also defines genres a little bit, and that's the type of music that I really love. And I saw them live, great. And I was quite saddened by the fact that they broke up, because if they would have continued down this path, it would have been truly spectacular. Well, this is a spectacular record. It is one of the best metal records of the past 10 years. In my opinion, what is your favorite metal record of the last 10 years? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, In Solitude. I'm gonna stick with Uppsala, and I'm gonna stick with contemporary metal, and I'm gonna stick with the In Solitude connection. I'm talking about a band called Reveal. This is their album that came out in 2021 called Doppelherz. There's some In Solitude connection, and they're from the same town, and this record is just fantastic. It's like almost like black metal punk rock, if that makes sense. It doesn't really make sense, but it's dirty, it's raw, it's noisy. It's kind of fucked up, like in the best possible way. They put out their first record in 2011, and this one came out in 2021. And I'm hoping for more records with this band, because it's yeah, this is just. I mean, I don't know if a black metal band from Uppsala wants to be called wonderful. But in my world, this is a wonderful, wonderful piece of music that David turned me on to, and I'm really thankful. I think this is just a fantastic record. Yeah, let's talk about some more crossover thrash or thrash crossover type of music. I'm going to talk about the band Sacrilege BC out of Berkeley, California. They started in 1984. Broke up in 1994, and this is their first record, Party with God, from 1986. And then they put out a record called Too Cool to Pray in 1988. This is just that, like thrashy crossover type of metal. I really like it. It has a super cool energy to it. The production's kind of dirty and raw in the best possible way, and you know, it's just one of those records, like thrashy but sloppy and punky at the same time. It's a really fantastic little album. Party with God, Sacrilege BC. I love this type of thrash crossover type of stuff. Very, very good. And speaking of sacrilege, here's the Sacrilege that forced Sacrilege from the US to change the name to Sacrilege BC, because this Sacrilege was also a band. This Sacrilege from UK, they were banned from 1984 to 1989. They broke up, and I think they got back together in 2015 or something like that. So they're playing shows again. The metal world does not have a lot of women involved. Which is a conversation maybe for another day, but it's kind of a sad state of affairs that the metal world is quite macho and quite manly. Sacrilege from the UK is a beautiful exception to that. Linda Simpson is a fantastic screamer of metal. Sacrilege, one of those bands that started as like almost like a crust punk band, and their debut record, Behind the Realms of Madness from 1985, is just on that like verge of like being crust punk, but at the same time metal. They made 2 more records after this that's more fine-tuned metal. They're also good, but I like this one because it's just like one of those It's thrashy, it's dark, it's sloppy, and it's just heavy, and it's such a great metal record of that sort of weird genre of UK thrash, basically. It is interesting because there was almost a whole genre or subgenre of punks in the UK in the mid 80s that went thrash. I mean, you have your English Dogs, a prime example of that, and Discharge, they went thrash in the worst possible way. Maybe that's a record that I should talk about on Fair Shake, Grave New World. That's a horrible record. I mean, Exploited went metal and GBH went metal. To various results, but it is cool that there's a weird subgenre that felt very UK, and the metal approach that they took was very different from the one in the US. But yeah, this is a great UK thrash metal, neo-crust maybe people call it. But yeah, this is just the perfect melting point between like crustcore and punk and metal, and it's great. Check out their other records as well if you want. It's more traditional metal, but more just thrash metal. But yeah, Sacrilege from the UK. Next album is a record that I bought in 1988 when it got released because I was into thrash metal and I did not know about their punky past or anything. I'm talking about a band from Stockholm, Sweden called Agony. They started in 1984 and they spelled Agony with an I, and they were like a punk band, and they toured the UK with Anti-Semics and Discharge before they went full metal. This record is just full metal. I mean, there's like touch of like punk to it, but mainly in the fact that everyone in the band is wearing Discharge shirts. Ties in nice with the Sacrilege record that I just talked about because they're wearing Grave New World shirts, because I think they toured with Discharge on that tour. Anyway, this is just kind of like a Bay Area thrash record. That sound, but made in Sweden in 1988. It's really cool. 8 songs, super well played, good songwriting. The production is pretty crisp, clean, but I don't think it really distracts from the power of it. And I mean, it's just one of those weird metal bands of Sweden that I have a feeling that they kind of got stuck in between, like the punk thing, and then like 2 years later you have Entombed and all those bands coming out of their gates just like fucking killing it, and Agony just like one of those weird like in-betweener bands. But if you like that kind of Bay Area thrash metal sound, the First Defiance is a super solid record, and I really like it. And I mean, I bought it when it came out and just like really enjoyed it as a thrash metal record. Yeah, a lot of metal kids used to be punks, I guess. Yeah, it does seem like a common theme is that a lot of these bands, they used to be punk and hardcore kids and then they got into metal. I did it the opposite way. I was into metal. I wanted to play metal, but my proficiency as a bass player, because I played bass in the early days, wasn't really enough. So when I discovered punk and hardcore, I'm like, oh, this is a good way out of, you know, trying to learn how to play. Yeah. I'm going to talk about a band from New Jersey. You know, Whiplash. Started in 1984. Quite, I mean, not famous, but one of the funny things about them is that on this record, everyone in the band is called Tony. The 3 Tonys, which is kind of funny. This is a super solid, just like a thrash metal record of that time. Definitely has some hardcore connections. Agnostic Front and Carnivore doing backup vocals on this record, and 2 of the Tonys also played in MOD, or Method of Destruction, with Billy Milano. And then the 3rd Tony joined one of my favorite alternative rock bands of the 90s, Into Another, which is kind of a weird thing. Also, the artwork is done by Sean Taggart, that did artwork for Crumbsuckers and Agnostic Front, and some of my favorite crossover records. So there's definitely a connection. This is more just thrash metal, touch of crossover. They put out one more record called Ticket to Mayhem, and then the lineup changes started happening, and they just became one of those bands that like every record there's a different lineup. It happens, but yeah, this is really cool thrasher, and if you're into that, I mean, New York hardcore adjacent metal, then solid pick. All right, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite bands as far as contemporary metal goes, and they're pretty far cry from the type of metal I usually listen to, because the metal that I like, if you've noticed anything from the 8 records I talked about, I like it to be fast, thrashy, slight touch of crossover maybe, that kind of style. But this is a very different band. I'm talking about, of course, Vector, with their second record, Outer Isolation. Vector started in Tempe, Arizona, but then they relocated to Philly. It's their second record. They put out 3 records, and this is, I mean, I would maybe progressive metal. It's technical, it's insanely well played, but it also has like a really thrashy element to it. There's definitely some Slayer in there, but there's also a lot of Voivod. Voivod being maybe my favorite metal band. You will have to wait for that list. I love this record. I was completely blown away the first time I heard it. I love his weird screeching, screaming voice. I think maybe that's a deal break for some people, but I think it just blends perfectly with the music. All 3 records are great. I think this is as far as like weird, progressive, thrashy, blast beaty metal goes. I think this is perfect band. So check out Vector, and I mean they're still around, so they come to town, maybe go check them out live. So the last record I want to talk about is of course Mayhem, and it's not the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem. I'm talking about the Portland metal band Mayhem. They started in 1983, put out this record, this soul record, in 1987. And I think it's a super cool record. Some thrash metal, speed metal, but also just like a lot of heavy metal. There's some Judas Priest in there, there's some Motorhead in there, and it's super solid, really cool record. When the band broke up, the drummer, also a guy called the Hippie Slayer, him and the guitar player Eric Olson went on to play in a band called Poison ID on the All Out War album. And after the All Out War album, also the bass player for Mayhem joined Poison ID. So 3 out of 4 people in Mayhem ended up in Poison ID. And if you know anything about music, you know that Poison ID is some of the best hardcore music you ever put to vinyl. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So check out Mayhem, Burned Alive, with 3 out of 4 Poison ID members. It's a great record. And there you have it, 10 metal records that you might or might have not heard. I love all these records, that kind of style of metal that I like. I want to do a top 10 metal albums or metal bands of all time, but I need to really focus and dig in. What's your favorite metal band? Are you metalhead? Do you like metal at all? How many of these records are in your collection? Please leave some comments in the comment section. And once again, thank you for watching, and thank you for, thank you for being here to hear me ramble on about music and such. It really means a lot to me. Until next time, stay well, my friends. Bye-bye.